Oxford and Cambridge Society of Ghana was set up for alumni to network among themselves and promote worthy social causes in the Ghanaian community. It is a society that organizes alumni events, including education, community support events, speaking events, fundraising, and networking events in Ghana. Oxford and Cambridge Society of Ghana oath made their speaking and networking engagement to bring together Ghanaian alumni of the two prestigious institutions to have a positive impact on the society.
Beneficiaries of an elite education, we have been afforded privileges that are both rare and powerful. With these privileges come a profound moral responsibility, a duty to serve and to lead in ways that extend far beyond our immediate circles. The very essence of privilege is opportunity. The doors open to us are doors that remain closed to many around the world. These opportunities, however, are not just gifts, they are callings. They beckon us to act, to utilize what we have learned and earned to benefit others. This is the cornerstone of a concept I wish to discuss today: the moral responsibility to serve. People work hard their entire lives, retire with the understanding that they've paid into SNET and they will have a pension they can rely on. And projections indicate that those hopes are futile, because in 12 years, it's projected to have zero. The real rate of return of SNET's assets is 0.9% in cities. In cities, SNET's return rates, nominal return rates, have been lower than Ghana Treasury bills. How? Usually a pension fund, because of the long-term horizon they have, is able to take higher and better risk-adjusted returns than what you will get from the most liquid treasuries. Real return of 0.9%. This is beyond a disgrace. This is beyond criminal. It should shock the conscience of any well-meaning human being, because we are robbing from our senior citizens. In terms of governance, our standing on the Corruption Perception Index has now slipped to 73 out of 180 countries. A significant drop reflecting widespread corruption that has crippled policy effectiveness and equity in resource distribution. At Oxford and Cambridge, we're scholars. We look at the data, and the data is alarming. We've had a decline in press freedom. We fell 30 places to 60th in the World Press Freedom Index, signaling an increasingly hostile environment for journalists and media practitioners. We've had almost 30 attacks last year on journalists, of which almost 70% were perpetrated by the state. Our healthcare system is under immense strain with limited resources and access, in spite of fanfare around the expansion of healthcare infrastructure and the supposed construction of 111 hospitals. We have seen very little of that materialize, and we continue to see massive gap in healthcare disparities between the urban populations and our rural populations. Educational outcomes are suffering. With the expansion of access with free SHS, we've seen inadequate infrastructure. We've seen a deterioration in the quality of our education, and graduates entering the workforce with no jobs in sight, limiting the future prospects for our youth. The convergence of these economic, political, and social crises at such a scale presents a dire situation. It calls for an urgent need for decisive action and reform to address these multidimensional challenges to prevent further deterioration and ensure a stable, prosperous future for Ghana. And probably most concerning for me is corruption. Corruption in government, corruption in civil society, corruption in the private sector, corruption in our hospitals, corruption in the media, and most alarmingly, corruption in our religious bodies. When our churches and religious institutions become corrupt and compromised, the very moral fiber of our society erodes, and it is the most dangerous situation we can find ourselves in. When our children grow up today and they see that the people who succeed are not the people who work hard and follow a moral compass, but are the people who take shortcuts and do what is wrong with impunity and without accountability, we are setting up a society of young men and women and children who have no incentive to do what is right and to do what is just. We are creating incentives for young people to no longer aspire to go to Oxford and Cambridge and come back and make a difference in our country, but we are creating an incentive for people to rather go into politics to loot and pillage and aggrandize wealth with zero consequences, with impunity, with no accountability. And when they see our media is silent, when they see our pastors and prophets and imams are silent, silence is complicity. Doing nothing and saying nothing in and of itself is action. It is not inaction. It is endorsing the status quo. It is telling our young minds that what they see, the moral decay of our society, is fine. And it's easy to be cynical and complain, but we must take an active role in shaping the political, social, and economic transformation of our country, as our alumni have done since history, since the very founding of these institutions. And it requires sacrifice. It requires being able to engage with discomfort. I have spoken up openly and vocally about corruption and the mismanagement of our economy and the perilous failure of moral leadership in this country. And in the wake of my remarks, which went viral, I have experienced 16 different encounters with the police, including one in which I was assaulted, and another in which I was threatened and intimidated in the presence of my 2-year-old daughter, who was watching and crying in the hot, blazing sun. And because we've ignored climate change and galamsey, the sun is hotter than when we grew up. So it's easy to give up in the face of the state hitting back. It's easy to keep quiet. It's easy to feel our efforts will be futile, or they will be too great a risk for ourselves, our families, our business. So we're quiet. But that's exactly what they want. That's what they hope. That's what they expect. But we can't give up. Because if that's what our ancestors did, we will still today be colonized by the British. We will not be free men and free women. We would still be slaves. If our forefathers and foremothers gave up and said it was too hard, it was too difficult, it was too dangerous, we would not have the freedom we enjoy today. We have extraordinary privilege as alumni of some of the most prestigious universities in the world. It is my contention that we have a moral responsibility to serve and to continue the long history of service and impact of our beloved universities, Oxford and Cambridge. It requires him to speak truth to power, which requires him to take accountability for where there are deficiencies and failures in leadership, which requires him to not just take credit for what has gone right and say, I'm not involved when things have gone wrong. That is not our training at Oxford University. Our training is the penalty of leadership requires you to take responsibility and accountability for all things. When things go wrong, it requires you to get up and say, this isn't going wrong, but this is what I'm going to do to fix it. It requires intellectual honesty. It requires us to say when doomsday is happening, that doomsday is happening. And this is what we're going to do to fix it. It requires us to eschew the politics of gaslighting and the politics of dishonesty. We need to have very frank conversations with the country about the challenges we're facing, because we see it. We see the unprecedented corruption. We see the economic challenges. We see, and when we sit and say, oh, this is due to COVID, oh, this is due to Ukraine war, oh, this is due to these externalities. All these externalities have affected all the other countries. Why hasn't the other African countries gone bankrupt? Why haven't the other African countries had their pension funds projected to deplete to zero by 2036? We need to take responsibility and accountability for our own complicity in the mess we find ourselves in.
Thank you for watching Nation One TV. Kindly subscribe for more news updates.